Welcome to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I sat down with author Lynn Ady and we discussed her latest book, her first book, The Pink Blanket. Lynn has wanted to write pretty much all her life. And as we sit down and talk, we learn about her journey to actually going from thinking about writing to getting that book published. And now she's working on a series. Welcome the newest member to our book club, author Lynn Ady. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, being a part of the book club. I'm so excited to speak with you today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on here tonight.
You are very welcome. So, I like the fact that, you're an author, that you're coming on to my podcast to help promote your book. And so I always like to ask authors, questions about their journey to becoming an author. And one question that I always like to ask is, did you always know you wanted to be an author?
I've always wanted to be an author. I've always wrote. I guess I didn't really see myself as an author, but from the time I was an avid reader by the time I was like 6 years old. And I was always writing plays, songs, story. Like I've just always been imaginative, creative, I guess. And so it was just something that I guess I never really thought possible, but it was something that I always really enjoyed.
So why would you think it wasn't possible? Why did you think it was out of reach for you? Because obviously it's not. You're an author.
Right. I guess just growing up, I never really had I guess I'm from a small town and my family, love them, but it was just never really, things like that weren't talked about. Secondary school wasn't ever really talked about, or was it something I wanted to do, or that didn't seem realistic in my life even. And I guess I always felt that in order to be able to be a writer, you had to have some kind of a degree, you had to know what you were doing. And it's a very different world now, I guess, than when I was growing up. So things seem a little more reachable, or I guess is the word I'm looking for nowadays. But I guess just my upbringing and kind of what was presented to me, it just really didn't seem like it was ever an option or a possibility.
So obviously something happened, because you've written this book and you've published it. So what was that catalyst?
So what happened? Life, I guess. It's probably about 4 years ago now. I was approaching 40 and my youngest was soon to be graduating high school. I was in a really unhappy marriage. And I also deliver mail. I'm an on-foot delivery agent for Canada Post. So I have a lot of thinking time. And I guess just kind of, everything was just kind of coming at me. My kids are going to be grown up. What am I going to do? I certainly have no intentions or don't plan to deliver mail the rest of my life. I mean, it's just, my body can't keep up anymore. And, I just always had that dream, whether it was acting or something in the creative arts. And I don't know, one day I had an idea for a story that came to me, and it was based around a woman who's, caught in a domestically abusive relationship, marriage. And I guess in a way I just was kind of, relating that main character to myself. And it was just, am I happy? Like, do I want to have regrets? Do I want to look back and wonder what if? And so I don't know, I had a talk with myself on the street one day, and I just said, listen, like, what do you want out of life? Like, what are you doing? And, if you don't ever go for it, you're never going to know. And can you live with that regret if you don't? And I couldn't. It was something that I couldn't walk away from for some reason. And so it took the day I decided that I was going to do this, or at least attempt to do this. I realized I had a process in front of me before I could even get that pen to paper. And that was, is it possible? So what are my publishing options? What are my chances of even, the story seeing the light of day outside of my loose leaf and computer and stuff like that? And so, I Googled and Googled and Googled, different authors, and when I started realizing that some of the biggest authors in the world never set foot inside of a university, I just went, well, okay, maybe I can do this too. And then my story as well, it's based mainly Italy and Chicago, both places I've never been. And so I wanted to at least be able to have some kind of connection or, realistic idea of these cities, so that people, hopefully worldwide, if they read it, would be like, no, like relatable to those cities and be like, okay, what, just a little bit realistic. I mean, it's fiction, so not everything is as it should be, of course, but I just wanted to have some kind of, realism in the book. And so it was about 2 years of all that. And along that time, it was still working up the courage to actually go for it.
So it can be scary, right? It can be very scary to put your work out there to let other people read. But what was that publishing journey like? Did you self-publish? Did you find a publisher? What did that look like for you?
So I ended up self-publishing. I have a fault, and it's called lack of patience. And as I was reading and researching, a lot of what I found was that with traditional publishing, and again, I don't really know this world, and from where I'm from, those just aren't opportunities that I can talk to people that would be, easily familiar with that stuff. So I had decided after reading, about people self-publishing and stuff, and I did read that if you do self-publish, the chances of your book ever being picked up by a traditional publisher you pretty much closed that window, which was unfortunate, but it just, I felt that, anything I was kind of trying to research, it was either going to cost a lot of money to, find an agent, literary agents, or, and years. Sometimes they say it can take years before you can get a book deal, even if you even ever get one. And so I guess as I started writing I was kind of doing both at the same time, like looking into, because when I was finished, I wanted to know which way I was going and stuff. And so when I decided to self-publish, I thought, okay, it's probably the best option for me. I can do this on my timeline. If I get to the end of it and I read this book and it's like, oh God, what was I thinking? I didn't feel like I was indebted to somebody. I was nervous. I was scared. I was also, I had no self-confidence. I had no self-esteem anymore. Like, my marriage had just taken every last ounce of anything I had out of me. And so when I had decided to do this, I also was trying to build all that back up along the way, because I knew doing something like this and releasing it into a world, not only of a small town of people who can be fairly judgmental, but also the world, which can also be very critical. Was it something I'm going to be okay putting myself out there in such a big way? And not even necessarily the book itself, but just that, she thinks she can write a book. Like, there was all my ego. I had to fight it the whole way through the whole process. But I did choose to self-publish, and I'm happy with that. I mean, ideally, a traditional publisher would have been a great opportunity, but I'm happy with the self-publishing. I chose a company in Canada, and they were incredible because I knew nothing. I'm not a tech person, so they really walked me through everything. And editing. I mean, it was almost like going to school again. It was just like, wow, I didn't realize how bad my grammar was.
There. You don't even realize how much there's to it, to the process, until you start going through it. And I'm like you, I get very impatient.
Yes.
And when I wanted to be an author, I, wrote this, what I thought was the best book ever, right? And started shopping it out to publishers only to get a bunch of no's. And it's heartbreaking when it's, some of the no's were, it's good, but not for us or whatever, but a no is a no.
Yeah.
And, it's bad enough that you were afraid to put yourself out there, but then for somebody to say no is even more. So kudos to you for seeing it through till the end. It's out there, and I can't wait to hear about the book itself. So the book is called The Pink Blanket. Yes. And so tell us about the book.
So the book, like I said, it's based around the main character, Taya. She's trying to leave her abusive husband. She's got motive. She's finally come to realize that life isn't going to get better. It's probably just going to get worse if she stays. And of course, being fiction and there's things, of course, that are, elemental to keep it entertaining and exciting and moving along. But so she's faced with having to leave somebody that she loves, but yet knows she can't have a life with. And so she's hoping to return. She lives in Chicago, and she's hoping to return back to her home of Padua, Italy. And in doing so, she has to find a way to allow her husband to let her go, and she's hoping peacefully. But along that journey, there's obstacles that she faces that make her question what she's wanting out of, like, what she's capable of. I mean, she knows she's got one goal in mind, and that she knows is there's no room to waver, but she starts to contemplate whether there's different options that can maybe fall into place along her plan when she meets this man who actually seems to be a really nice man. But, given her husband, her view on men is tainted. And it was something she was never willing to consider again. But he seems to be able to change her mind along the way.
So, Jamie, in listening to you speak about the book, would you say that the character kind of mimics you and the things that you were going through at the time that you wrote it?
In a sense, I feel like that was how I kind of got my thoughts and feelings out. In a way, I say that it helped with my healing path a little bit. None of the circumstances, what she faces or anything that I faced in my life, I just wasn't presented those problems, thankfully. But just the basis of, how you feel. And I mean, not just physical, but mental and verbal abuse can be just as detrimental sometimes. And there's things that are really hard to come back from. And so I really wanted to portray realistic thoughts and emotions through her. And I felt that in, I guess, putting myself not necessarily in her place, but allowing my thoughts and feelings to come through her experiences was definitely reflective of what I had been feeling and stuff.
Why the pink blanket? Is that a significant factor in the book? Does that mean something?
It does. And it's funny because the title didn't come up till when I was almost near done writing. But in the story, Taya is able to get a break from her husband, and she goes back home to Italy to spend some time with her family. And when she comes back to Chicago, she brings this pink blanket with her. And it's kind of her symbol or form of comfort that she has when she's by herself, that she uses. And there is another aspect to the pink blanket, but I can't disclose that.
I understand.
So there is, but as I was going along in the book, so the pink blanket was already in the book, and I was near the finished writing process, and I was actually in bed sleeping one night, and it actually woke me up out of my sleep, and I was like, the pink blanket. I wrote it down on the notepad beside my bed because lots of times I would get these ideas in the middle of the night, and you want to wake up in the morning to them or whatever. And so I'd written it down, and I just kind of let it sit there and stewed about it. And I'm like, it's such a odd name for a book, especially because it's like, it's a series. And so I'm still working on the other books but I guess because of the main point of the story. So I just kind of kept it there or whatever, and went back and forth on the title. And then I happened to be in a local store. It was a few weeks later in my hometown, and it was just the softest, coziest pink blanket. And I'm not a pink person at all. And I saw this blanket, and I'm like, I had to have it. And so when I took it home, I was like, okay, maybe that's a sign, because I believe in all that stuff, and divine timing and the universe giving you what you need. And so then as I'm writing, the more I kind of kept the blanket with me as I was finishing the writing process and everything, and I started calling it the pink blanket, just to see how that felt, I guess, and as I kept writing, it was funny because it kind of kept building. And the one day I was sitting there and I was like, man, if this could work, if this would be successful enough for me, I would love to be able to donate pink blankets, to women's shelters across the world, just as a form of hope and comfort for women leaving those situations when they go to somewhere and they don't really have anything. Lots of them have to leave everything behind. And so I was just, one dream was just spiraling into another, and it was just, so it was just always kind of there. And by the end of it, I just, there's a pretty significant part at the very end of the book with the pink blanket. But I was just like, this is what it is. It's different, but for some reason, that's just what it's supposed to be. So,
that's really cool, especially a part about wanting to donate pink blankets to, say, shelters across the world, because women who, you're right, maybe need that pink blanket as a sign of comfort. So, it's funny how being an author can spark other things, right? When you didn't plan on it. So you also said something that I picked up on. You said it's a series. So when you started writing it, did you know it was going to be a series?
Yeah, from day one, I knew that it would be. I knew that the length of the story to tell would definitely take more than one book. I intend to have 2 more. And so that was kind of where I was conflicted with the title, because I'm like, how do I do a follow-up to the pink blanket? But I, like the rest of it, I trust that it will just all work and things will fall into place. But yeah, I knew that it would be a series from the beginning.
And it will fall into place, because it sounds like it's fallen into place from somebody who never knew they were going to be a writer because you thought it wasn't reachable. Now you're writing series. Right. So, I mean, again, I think it's fantastic the way kind of how you on this journey, and now look at you, this published author, working on book 2 and 3 in your series of books. So, that's a huge feat. So in having the first book out there, and when did you publish it?
I believe it was January, right around the end of January of 2020 is when it was finally published.
So about a year.
Yep.
Have you found that the marketing has been a challenge and the promotion of the book?
Yeah, once COVID, well, 2 reasons. When I wrote the book, once it was published, I was really apprehensive to let people know that I actually had written this book. At the time of publishing, 3 people knew, and that was my 2 kids and my sister. And so at that time, because I didn't want I wasn't prepared for my ex. I remember at one point telling him I wanted to be a writer, and he literally laughed in my face. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do this without you, kind of thing. And then of course we proceeded to split up and stuff and that. So I wasn't looking forward to having any negative energy around it. I was still getting used to the idea of the fact that I had done this, and was it even, I guess, good enough for people to read. And one of the things I did do in the publishing process is I had gotten a Kirkus review, and my publisher even, he kept saying to me, because it was quite a process to wait for it, but she's like, do you want to wait in case they have a blurb that you can put on your book, it helps with marketing and stuff, or do you want to just go ahead and maybe add something to your website? And I was like, well, I don't know. Of course you want that Kirkus review, that little bit on your book. I've seen them on many books I read or pick up in the store. And she's like, well, it's going to take a long time. And sometimes it's really hard to get a good review. And so I was like, no, for some reason I was going to wait. And anyways, it did come back, and it came back really good. And I was so proud of myself for achieving that, because I felt like that was kind of a confidence boost in the fact that, okay, somebody actually might like this book. And so I had kept it quiet. I would, every once in a while be brave enough and I'd tell one of my friends, I'm like, okay, listen, I did a thing. Do you want to read it? Tell me what you think, and stuff like that. And it was tough because I wanted their opinion, but also it was like, I'm your friend. Are you going to give me an honest opinion? Because I want the honest opinions before I put this out into the world of everybody going, okay. And so it took me till July before I actually let my hometown know that I had written a book, and to people, my peers, like I had made it a full out announcement. But in the meantime, in March, when COVID hit here and we were, forced into lockdowns and all that stuff, and I was right in the midst of working with my publicist and working to get it put into one of the bookstore chains, that, if it did well enough in my area, then they would, grow to expand where they put it. But at that time, he came back with COVID, lack of staff, lack of all that stuff. He's like, we can't at this time. And so that was kind of disheartening, but also it was just like, okay, well, it's for whatever reason, it's just not meant to be. So, and just being able to go out to bookstores and go places, we're so limited and restricted right now with COVID and staffing that it's been pretty tough to try and market myself, especially, and also I'm shy. So I knew the marketing part was going to be a challenge already, but when I was finally working up the courage to just put it out there, it was like, nope, not yet, because now you can't. The world is saying you can't. There's too many things and stuff going on. So it has been difficult, but this last little bit, it seems things are hopefully maybe working in the positive direction. So I've kind of been getting on my game and figuring about how, I know it's been out for a year now. And so that's kind of, I guess, but it is what it is. So, I mean, if it's meant to work, it'll work. So
I agree with you. A great way to really market your book, and I didn't know this until after doing the podcast and learning, is to, if you can, hire a publicist.
Yeah.
Because a publicist will really work and put you out there. And I always thought getting a publicist was something you did when you were established. Right? I didn't think just anybody could get a publicist. And doing this podcast, I have interviewed and learned about what publicists do and how attainable they are. Right? And so it gives me hope, because I want to pass on that information to other authors, because I want it takes a lot just for you to write the book. So now you wrote the book, and now you want to get the book out there. And that might be something for you to consider, especially if you're shy. A publicist might be the way to go. I've talked to a lot of authors who have been very happy. It's made marketing much easier, and they looked at it as an investment into themselves.
Right. And I was fortunate back in, I think it was like end of December. No, it must have been right after it was published. So I guess in January. I actually had a publicist reach out. Well, Lamore Media reached out to me, and they had seen my book. I had put it, can't remember, I was in Kirkus Reviews, and I had also put it at New York Review of Books had also reached out to me asking if I wanted to advertise in there. And that was another thing that when they reached out to me to see if I would be willing to, put it in their magazine and their advertising, which would take place in, they had a bunch of different options, but one was like a big London book fair, one in Seattle, I believe. And there was another one, I can't remember now, but I had chosen 3. And then when COVID hit, all of those book fairs were canceled. And so I didn't get the opportunity to be able to have that kind of advertising done. But right around the same time, Lamore Media had reached out to me, and one of them had seen my book and were interested in representing me. And so I sent them both a copy of the book, just, as to see, if they're going to represent me, to know what they're representing, I guess. And so I have been working with them, and it has been great, because it's given me a lot of exposure to podcasts and different interviews and stuff, to get me more comfortable talking to people, because that's something that my first one was a nightmare. I still look back and think, oh, that poor lady. And it was in London, and it was live off the hop. I had no, it was so not good. but I said, I'll look back one day and it's
you'll
okay.
Laugh. You have to look back and you'll laugh, and it's okay. I think the book is wonderful, Jamie. I'm so glad that you came on the podcast to sit down and share with us and talk about it. I expect that when you get the second book out, that you'll be back to talk about that one.
I hope
and
so.
The third book. And so, because you are on the podcast, you are now an official member of the book club, which means you are welcome back at any time. I truly enjoyed speaking with you and learning about your journey and the pink blanket. I'll make sure all the links are in the podcast description so people can go out and purchase your book. And hopefully this podcast will help you promote it as well. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything. I love the opportunity to be able to be on here, and it's so great to be able to meet people and have these experiences. Just the promoting, but also the meeting of people, and just it's a really nice way of getting relationships, I guess, that you would have never formed otherwise. So
especially in a pandemic, right? Especially
Absolutely.
in a pandemic. So we can still reach out and meet new people, even though we may not leave the house.
Absolutely.
It is doable. I, again, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being a member of the book club. And, like I said, you are welcome back at any time.
Thank you. I look forward to being back.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. We just wrapped up with author Lynn Ady as we discussed her first book in a series titled The Pink Blanket. All of her information is in the podcast description. If you are an author and would like to be showcased on the podcast, or if you're someone who supports authors like an editor or a copywriter or an illustrator, we would love to have you on the show. It's really easy. Email me at brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Again, brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Next week, another author, a new member to the book club. But until then, keep writing.